eyes. What for?
Well, we are gonna do everything we can to get you out of here.
You gotta get me out of here, because I ain't got nobody else.
Her mother told us that she was dating this guy, and he's a bad guy, and we were trying to get her away from him. That's where the trouble began.
If you've ever watched Judging Amy, you might remember the character Graciela, played by Tara Correa McMullen. Even though her role wasn't that big, she made quite an impression. She was so good that the writers decided to include her in several more episodes.
Graciela! Graciela! We're gonna fight this!
Or maybe you remember her from the movie Rebound, where she starred alongside Martin Lawrence.
Get the eyes. What for?
Tara was just a 15-year-old girl with big dreams of making it in Hollywood. She had the talent and the potential, but unfortunately the glamour and glitz of Hollywood seemed to pull her into something much darker and more dangerous.
When we broke up, that's where things started going bad. It seemed like she started to hang around the wrong crowds.
As Tara's career progressed, she made some choices that ultimately took her out of the spotlight forever. One of the most significant and tragic decisions was falling in love with the wrong person, a decision that would lead to her untimely death.
Told us that she was dating this guy, and he's a bad guy, and we were trying to get her away from him. That's where the trouble began.
On October 21, 2005, her life was tragically cut short when a member of the Rollin' 60s gang in Los Angeles, Damian Watts, went on a shooting spree over 2 days, one of which resulted in Tara's death. The incident took place at an East Plymouth Street apartment building where Tara and her friends were hanging out. So how did a promising actress like Tara get mixed up with the wrong crowd? Let's dive a little deeper.
It was revealed that Tara is the girlfriend of Christopher Avery.
Tara Correa McMullen was born on May 24, 1989 and spent her early years in Vermont. From a young age, she loved dancing, singing, and playing the piano. She grew up on the East Coast, but in 1996, she moved to Northern California with her mom and sister. The relocation was rough at first, with the family bouncing around from one cheap motel to another. Eventually, they settled in Venice, Southern California, where Tara joined the choir and performed in several local dance shows. During this time, her mother worked in the office of a casting company. This connection led to a chance opportunity for Tara. Movie officials were struggling to find a tomboy for the film Rebound. Tara's mom thought her daughter, who had never acted before, might be perfect for the role. Devra McMullen, Tara's mom, recalled, quote, "They needed a girl who could play basketball, was heavier than the other girls, and had a rough-and-tumble tomboy vibe, but also a vulnerable heart that showed on camera. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Tara could do that. A producer saw Tara and immediately said, 'That's my girl.'" Around this time, Tara and her mom moved to Inglewood, thinking it would be a safe spot near the airport and close to the beach. They were unaware of the city's gang presence. After Rebound wrapped up, Tara landed a recurring role on Judging Amy, playing Graciela Reyes, a troubled teenager. Judge Amy tries to help Graciela turn her life around, but the character gets involved in a drive-by shooting and is eventually in prison. As Tara filmed Judging Amy, people around her started noticing changes. About halfway through her stint on the show, Tara became unreliable. The agency's staff had to pick her up and drive her to the set to ensure she showed up. After her role on Judging Amy ended, her agency dropped her as a client. Determined to continue acting, Tara returned and the agency signed her again. But after she missed an audition, they dropped her a second time. Things started to spiral for Tara Correa McMullen after her parents divorced. She began dating an older gang member from the Sentinella Park Bloods, which caused a lot of tension. Tara's mom was strongly against this relationship and ended up calling the police on them several times. Devra McMullen recalled, "He was scary enough that I didn't want him in my house. I kept calling and I think the police got sick of hearing from me. They'd say, 'Oh, it's Tara's mom again.'" Despite her mother's attempts to intervene and even persuade Tara to move to Glendale with her, Tara chose to stay in Inglewood with her boyfriend, and they ended up getting an apartment together. As time went on, Tara's best friend noticed a significant change in her. Tara started hanging out with people who resembled the kind of characters she played on screen. Her best friend said, quote, "She was taking a wrong turn into street life, just running around getting involved with gangs and causing trouble." This was around the time when Tara began her own gang involvement. Her best friend remembered a disturbing visit when Tara showed up at his place with a bruised face. When he asked what happened, Tara revealed that she had just been initiated into the gang the day before. Her gang name was Lady Kick, and she even got it tattooed on her chest. Her friend described the scene. She showed up at my door the next day wearing all red, and her face was kind of messed up. She told me she'd been put on the gang the day before, and she had the tattoo right here on her chest. Things took an even darker turn when Tara's boyfriend became increasingly controlling and abusive. Tara's friend shared, she told me that he'd lock her in a room and threaten to blow her brains out if she tried to leave. I looked into her eyes and I didn't see the beautiful blue eyes I used to know. All I saw was darkness. It was like she wasn't even there anymore. Now, before we dive back into the story, let's take a closer look at what initiation means in female gang culture and the various ways someone might become a member. First up is blessed in. This is kind of like getting a VIP pass into the gang. Sometimes women can join a gang without going through the usual initiation steps. Instead, they get blessed in or courted in, which is basically a special invite for someone who has something the gang needs. This could be a skill like dealing drugs or boosting cars, or it might be as simple as having a car that the gang needs for their operations. It's a pretty rare way to get in, but it's definitely easier than the more intense initiation methods. Next, we have kidnapping. This one really shows how far some people will go to prove themselves. Take Callie for instance. To join a local gang, she kidnapped her friend and coerced her into intimate acts for money. This method is unfortunately common for girls trying to get into gangs because it's seen as a way to demonstrate their commitment and capability. However, Callie's actions caught up with her, leading to 2 separate sentences totaling 4.5 years for kidnapping and forcing intimacy when she was just 13. Then there's abused in. This initiation ritual is deeply disturbing and involves existing gang members assaulting and abusing new female recruits. It's meant to establish dominance and control while inflicting severe physical and psychological trauma on the recruit. Although it's not a widespread practice, it does happen in some particularly violent and predatory gangs. Groups like MS-13 and the Latin Kings are known to use this method. It's a severe breach of human rights and the law, causing significant harm to the victims. Next up is gang abuse. This one is unfortunately quite common. In this method, a girl wanting to join a gang has to roll a dice to determine how many male gang members she will be intimate with. Unlike the abused-in method, which is purely about the abuse itself, gang abused might also require the girl to either recruit another girl into the gang or participate in the act herself, whether she wants to or not. It's a grim and traumatic way to prove oneself. Then we have jumped in. This initiation can be extremely harsh and dangerous, especially for girls. Here, new recruits might have to face a physical assault from existing gang members. Sometimes these beatings can be so severe that they lead to serious injury or even death. Research shows that young people undergoing these types of initiations are actually more likely to get hurt compared to if they simply refuse to join. The details of this ritual can vary, but it usually involves the recruit fight the recruit having to fight against 3 or more gang members for a set duration. The purpose behind this brutality is to assess the recruit's toughness and willingness to stand up for the gang. Take Christina Cruz, for instance. Growing up in a rough, gang-dominated area in northeast Los Angeles, she went through a brutal initiation ritual known as jumped in. This kind of initiation involves getting physically attacked by existing gang members to prove you're tough enough to be part of the crew. Unfortunately, this path led Christina into a life of crime and addiction, which eventually caught up with her in some serious ways.
Girls, right? But they were like, no, she's like, we gotta get you again because we didn't get you good. Like, bro, you guys are too big ass fucking girls. Fucking, I'm all small, you know?
Another initiation method is called jacked in. Here's how it plays out. To prove their worth, potential new female members might be asked to steal a car at gunpoint. If they pull it off, they're in. A notable example of this happened in January 2008, when a 17-year-old named Charles Brown in Kamisha Lake, New York, tried to join a local Crips gang. He climbed into a parked car where 3 people were already sitting and threatened the driver with a gun to steal it. This was not just a car theft, it was a test to prove his loyalty and bravery. Then there's the fire trial or trial by fire, which is as intense as it sounds. In this initiation ritual, recruits have to engage in risky or illegal activities involving fire, demonstrating their commitment and readiness to take extreme risks.
In the case of a vicious gang initiation of a 16-year-old girl moves forward. Arnisha Bowers was found murdered, her body set on fire inside a Northeast Baltimore home.
For example, in December 2011, the Burga Center gang had their new female recruits set a dumpster on fire. The fire quickly spread and destroyed a nearby mall, illustrating just how dangerous these rituals can be for both the participants and the community. Next up, we have the unaliving rituals, which are some of the most harrowing. These are used by girl gangs often formed out of feelings of rejection, hatred, or personal betrayal. In these rituals, new members are required to commit violent acts like stabbings, typically targeting rival gang members to prove their loyalty and toughness. Brenda Paz's story is a stark example of this. At just 17, Brenda was a former gang member who had become an FBI informant. In 2003, she was tragically found stabbed to death near the Shenandoah River in Virginia. Her cooperation with authorities to expose the Mara Salvatrucha gang led to her being targeted and by former associates of the gang.
Hospital or the cemetery.
Her words were prophetic. Within the year, she was found on the banks of the Shenandoah River. She had been stabbed repeatedly.
Next up is cutting. The practice is both shocking and painful, and it's designed to test a woman's loyalty to the gang. The initiation involves using a sharp object like a razor blade to cut the skin of the person being initiated. Sometimes the recruits are willing participants, but often they're forced into it. For instance, back in 2008, there was a disturbing case at a school in Coney Island. 3 kids were arrested after they used a razor blade to cut over a dozen of their classmates.
Gunpoint.
They literally prevented a of a 16-year-old boy at the hands of MS-13.
This was all part of an initiation ritual for a local MS-13 gang. Some of the students were cut willingly, but others were held down and forcibly cut against their will. It's a grim reminder that both boys and girls can be caught up in these brutal initiation practices. The physical and emotional scars left by these rituals can last a lifetime, and it's truly troubling to see how gangs manipulate and harm young people in such devastating ways. Lastly, we've got Blood In, which is especially grim and brutal. In the Western Cape prison system in South Africa, there's a notorious set of gangs known as the Numbers Gang, which includes the 26s, the 27s, and the 28s. These gangs have a dark history that stretches back to 1812. The 28s in particular are infamous for their extreme violence. When women want to join this gang, they face a tough choice for their initiation. They can either go through the gold line or the silver line. The gold line involves proving their worth by attacking correctional officers, essentially climbing the ranks through violence and brutality. On the other hand, the silver line is a horrifying option for those who are forced into becoming intimacy slaves for higher-ranking members. Now that we understand how gang initiation works, let's dive back into Tara's story. Despite her efforts to turn her life around, Tara faced incredible challenges. She was attending church every Sunday and had started going to counseling, trying to find a path to redemption. However, on October 21, 2005, at around 6 p.m., Tara, along with Jonathan, Jacquard, and Chris, was gathered in front of an apartment complex at 205 East Piedmont Street in Inglewood. This area was controlled by the Centinela Park Bloods, and it was known as a hotspot for CPF activities. The Centinela Park Bloods had a fierce rivalry with the Rolling 60 Crips, whose territory bordered just east of them. Chris was a member of the Centinela Park Bloods. While they were standing outside the complex, a gray truck with no license plate stopped in the middle of the street. A black male exited the truck, smiled at Jonathan, and then began shooting an AK-47 rifle in Jonathan's direction. Another man in the truck started firing a handgun, spraying bullets at the group. Tara was hit 5 times, and despite being rushed to the hospital, she died less than 3 hours later. Police recovered spent AK-47 casings and a blue shirt, which was later used by K9 units to identify the suspected shooter. The very next day, October 22nd, police made a lawful traffic stop on a silver truck and detained its 3 occupants, who were all members of the Rolling 60 Crips. The truck's driver was Percy, the rear passenger was Joseph, and the last passenger was Damien, also known as Chapa, who was suspected of being the shooter. Damien, a 23-year-old gang member, had been on a 2-day shooting rampage. The day before Tara's on October 20th, 2005 at around 5:17 p.m., Andre and Lester were standing outside their grandparents' home on the 1200 block of West 84th Street. This residence was in an area controlled by the A-Trays, another gang. Andre and Lester were members of the A-Trays, and historically, the Rolling 60s and the A-Trays had been arch enemies, with hundreds of killings between them. Andre saw a gray 4-door truck stop in the middle of the street about 2 houses away. Several men got out of the truck and approached. Andre, sensing danger, passenger said, "What's up?" The men responded with, "Ish, what's up?" and immediately began shooting at Andre and Lester. Bullets flew into the residence, and as Andre, Lester, and their friend ran for cover, the shooters turned back and ran towards the truck, laughing as they re-entered and drove off. Fortunately, no one was injured during this shooting. The second shooting happened less than 10 minutes later at a home just over a mile away. Paul and Thomas were at one of Thomas's relatives' homes located in the 7200 block of Holiday Avenue, also within 8 Trey's gang territory. As Paul and Thomas were getting into their car, a man with a gun approached. He tried to fire, but the gun jammed, prompting the man to run away. Just then, another man appeared with an AK-47 rifle and began shooting at them. Thomas was instantly and Paul was seriously injured. The shooters then fled the scene in a silver truck. Police later collected 35 shell casings from the crime scene. Before the trial, Jonathan identified Damien on 2 separate occasions. During an interview, he picked Damien out from a 6-pack photo lineup, and he later identified Damien as the shooter during the preliminary hearing. However, at the trial, Jonathan's certainty wavered. He admitted that he was only present because the police had served him an arrest warrant and brought him to court. Although he acknowledged his previous identifications, he claimed that Damien, who was in the courtroom, didn't even resemble the photo he had identified earlier. When asked why he was reluctant to testify, Jonathan responded, "I'm cool, it's too long, no, I don't want to pursue this." Fred, a neighbor who witnessed the first shooting, identified Damien on 4 different occasions. On October 23rd, police visited Andre's house and showed him a 6-pack photo lineup. According to the detective, Andre appeared nervous and unhappy to see them. Another man in the home made eye contact with Andre and gestured as if to say, "You better not say anything to the police." Following this, Andre became evasive and avoided answering the detective's questions. Later that day, 2 officers returned to Andre's home for further questioning. Andre told Officer Mendoza, "Y'all think I'm stupid. I saw who shot my officer. It was chopping from the 60s. I know that guy. The detective showed me pictures of him today. I ain't no snitch and I ain't gonna testify." At the trial, Andre acknowledged that he knew Damian Watts, also known as Choppin' from the Rolling 60s Crips. Damian Watts was charged with 2 counts of first-degree for the killing of McMullen and Sanders, 6 counts of attempted 1 count of shooting at an inhabited dwelling, and 1 count of felon in possession of a firearm. The jury found Watts guilty of multiple gang-related charges, multiple firearm allegations, and the special circumstance allegation of multiple murders. Despite these charges, Watts pled not guilty, leading to a jury trial where he was ultimately convicted of the crimes at the Los Angeles Superior Court. In January 2009, Watts was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole and is currently incarcerated at Calipatria State Prison, California. Tara's tragic death left her family in mourning. She is survived by her mother, father, and sister.